Welcome, everyone, to the last day of the conference. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking about filling the gaps and all the opportunities to collectively address recycling and composting in our communities. So I first wanted to get a sense of who's here. If you represent a community, anyone here from like public sector, community? Political counts. Nonprofit.
Yeah.
Okay. Private sector, service provider. What am I missing? Those who have not raised their hands. University. Excellent.
Oh, hospitals.
Hospitals. Good.
Planning agency.
Planning agency. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Elisa Seltzer. I am the project manager for NextCycle Michigan on behalf of Eagle. And I also am a senior consultant at RRS, Resource Recycling Systems, recycling, consulting, and planning consulting firm. I have with me today Kira Higgins, also with RRS, supporting me today, and this fabulous panel. And before I jump into our opportunities, I do want to give them each an opportunity to just briefly say who they are, what organization they're with, and what their role has been in NextCycle. And you're going to hear more from them a little later.
Hi, you all. My name is Ricky Blanding. I am the executive director and founder of Scrap Soils. We are a composting nonprofit based in Detroit. We recently just finished the NextCycle Flows track, which is a business incubator that really helped us identify pain points of our business model, as well as really great ways to move forward. Got us connected to some of the faces in this room, and also just kind of like gives us an association to be with as we grow in the future.
I'm Carrie Bliss. I'm principal of sustainability, which pretty much doesn't mean what it sounds like. I do a lot of business development work for PADNAS. We are a industrial recycler headquartered in Holland, Michigan. We have 30 locations in the state and one in northern Indiana. Last year, we recycled about 4 billion pounds of material, just to give you an idea of scale. But we're heavily on what I'll call the durable goods side of recycling versus the single-use side of recycling. And I think that's a very important distinction when you try to understand the complexities of the markets and how to have solutions to, they're very different streams, very different pathways, very different markets, and require different solutions. Oh, I'm an ambassador for the Ritz trend.
Recycling, innovation, and technology. She's on the advisory panel.
The advisory, yeah. Here you go. Ambassador and advisory.
Hello, everyone. I am Janae Brower, and I'm with Public Thread. We are actually a nonprofit social enterprise in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We do textile upcycling, so we work with manufacturers to divert their post-industrial textile waste, their scrap and surplus, from going to landfill or from going to lower value use, and turn those that material into high quality upcycled products that are manufactured in Grand Rapids. We pay living wages to our staff, and our focus is on how do we actually build the infrastructure, the market, the products that it takes to actually divert our post-industrial textile waste at scale, meaning for our Kent County area, which is about 26 million pounds of textiles that go into our landfill in Kent County specifically. So we want to look at a whole variety of different solutions and opportunities to be able to divert that waste by working with our community, designing around that material that we have in all the different industries that are in existence in our area, and doing a lot of economic development, and as well doing training and education, teaching people about how to sew, how to upcycle, how to repurpose existing materials, and really build out a creative economy that's very equitable, and allows people to be able to live out their creative side of their life, and hopefully make really good money at it. And from the NextCycle side, we were part of the RSC track last year as one of the participants.
Thanks, Claire.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Dion. I'm the Zero Waste Program Coordinator with the City of Ferndale. We were a part of the Lowe's cohort as well as a micro group kind of back in the first round as well. And, we're kind of coming at it from a public sector side and really utilizing this program to help us increase our capacity and technical skills.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Miller with Cascade Engineering out of Grand Rapids. We're a plastics manufacturer in this space. We're mostly known as a roll cart provider, but we also do manufacturing for automotive, furniture, heavy truck, some custom compounding work as well. My involvement in NextCycle is a CTIP member in the RSC track, which is involved in recruiting new programs or new participants into the program, and then evaluating those proposals that are submitted, and then also working on coaching through the process as they go through NextCycle.
Right, I think that's an invitation to speak louder. Is that it, Karen? No?
Doing fine, sorry.
Doing fine, okay. So a brief overview of NextCycle. If you have not heard much about it, it is an EGO initiative. It's all about building a circular economy, connecting across the supply chain. We want everyone to have access to recycling, whether you're a resident, a business, on the go, school, etc. We want to make sure those materials get processed. We want to make sure they have end markets, that these materials are staying in the circular economy. How do we do that? We do that through innovation challenges, which are accelerator tracks that we invite teams, projects, communities, startups into a process where they can receive technical support, one-on-one mentoring, business plan development, access to partners, networks, and funding to accelerate their path and their role in the circular economy. And you're going to hear some great examples of teams that have gone through this process and hear from them. It's a data-based initiative, which means we work hard to gain an understanding of what's happening in Michigan, who has access, where do we need processing capacity. That data is available on the website, and we use it to curate data for the teams and really drive an understanding of where the opportunities are. We are also accelerating climate-based solutions. So tracking the metrics, and I'm going to share some of those in a minute, all about connecting partners and partnerships, looking for centering equitable impact and making sure we're providing opportunities across the board. And I'm going to share a little bit about the economic advantages. So let's jump into it. It's also a super collaborative initiative. Like I stated, it's funded by Eagle. They are a co-collaborator in this very innovative process. RRS drives the initiative. We have it also, we run NextCycles in Colorado and Washington State. But here in Michigan, the Michigan Recycling Coalition, who's hosting us here, is also very much involved in NextCycle, as is Centropolis Accelerator. So we have quite a great team, and we're always looking to improve and involve as we grow the program. So what is Michigan's opportunity? We are targeting 2.7 million tons of available recyclables and organics that are currently going to landfill that could be recovered today, tomorrow, theoretically, could be recycled and recovered to reach a 45% recycling goal, which is a state goal. At 45%, there would be an additional 7 million tons of CO2 equivalent kept out of the atmosphere. And there would be 47,800 additional jobs here in Michigan at a 45% rate. So recycling grows jobs, it's a so does composting, huge opportunity for economic development. Where we are currently, we all know we're doing a heck of a lot, right? We're already having a positive impact on Michigan's economy. Right now, there are 72,000 jobs attributed to direct, indirect, and induced jobs. So that's like the people that work at the MRF, the trucks that drive the materials to the end market, all the people working at Padnas to get it to the end market manufacturer to make new goods and packaging. The total labor income now, snapshot, $4.9 billion, right? Big number in Michigan. I mean, we're rocking it. with a value add of 8.2 billion. So our total economic output now in the recycling industry is $17.1 billion. So we can all pat ourselves on the back for the work we're doing because it's really making a difference. When you look at, so our sector from an economic standpoint is called the recycling, reuse, and remanufacturing industries. And in terms of our current economic output, here's a snapshot of where that economic output is coming from. Full half on is manufacturing. All right, so we got a lot of manufacturers here at the conference. You've seen their booths. They are really driving. They want the recycled content feedstock to make the products and packaging to go back on the shelves. 30% is reuse. We all know the EPA hierarchy. We want more reuse. We've heard from folks doing refillables, and I think there's someone that had a booth at the conference. You might even be in this room. And then brokering, again, we've got a representative here in terms of brokering and supporting services, a full 10%. And then we've got collections and processing at 8%. There's a small sliver of municipal and bottle redemption. All of these are facets of this economy, and we want to grow them all. In terms of what is, these are big numbers, but they're kind of meaningless unless you put them in context. The RRR industry, recycling, remanufacturing, reuse industries, is about even with the auto supply sector, the vehicle parts, the manufacturing. That's a big industry here in Michigan. So that's kind of where we're at right now, with the opportunity at 45% to be equal to the transportation and tourism industry. Again, we all know these industries, they're big, they have impact. Recycling has that same impact now and potential to grow even further. We are adding jobs across Michigan right now, but the current employment, 72,000, we can add another 48,000 jobs by continuing to grow recovery. We also are tracking the number of MRFs, material recovery facilities, where this intermediate processing is taking place. The Ann Arbor MRF recently came online in the past year or so, has added 30,000 tons of processing capacity to Southeast Michigan, which is where we need the most growth in processing capacity. It's where our population density lies. In terms of MRFs across Michigan, here's our distribution. There are 30 of them now. Recycle Ann Arbor is processing over 50,000 tons. Marquette has added capacity. They're at about 14,000 tons and growing. Lansing and Terra's MRF, again, within the past 5 years, they're processing 30,000 tons per year. We are adding a lot of processing capacity. GFL has a facility in New Boston that is growing big capacity, and there's a planned WM facility in Detroit that will be coming online in the next few years. I don't know however long they take to build, but coming online. So there's a lot of activity because we know this is a gap and an opportunity to fill. As we heard from Kate at the keynote earlier today, that today we could recycle, what'd she say, twice as many plastics as we are now? Like, there is the need. We know that Tab and CleanTech and PlastiPack, who take our water bottles and our detergent jugs and turn them back into water bottles and detergent jugs, they are reaching for recycled content feedstock from 6 to 8 states, where Michigan has enough of those. If we were all recycling them, they will be manufactured. They are manufactured here in Michigan, but the feedstock, that recycled content, in terms of what people are putting in their bins, they have to go to other states to get that content. So the demand is now. Growing this capacity is essential for our recycling circular economy future. I also want to touch on organics. About 38% of what's currently going into landfills is organic and compostable. To be clear, we don't want any organics going in landfills. Organics decompose and create methane, and it is a huge climate problem. And so to meet the statewide 45% recycling goal, the organics recovery needs to quadruple. So, the state of Michigan with the planning opportunity is bringing in new carrots and sticks and permitting and all sorts of things to help the composting industry grow in the state. The largest gap in organics is food waste. huge opportunities for reuse, composting and recovery. And right now of 150 composting facilities in the state, only 8 accept food waste. I didn't mention that before I worked at RRS, I came from Emmett County, which was one of the first public sector composting facilities in the state to accept food scraps, now accepting from both commercial and residential. And what was it, 3 million pounds recently reached?
Yeah.
And 3 million pounds have been recovered from Emmett County. That's a small rural community, right? So what's possible? We have a roadmap, we have models, so we got a lot to do to get there. So we need collection, we need processing, and we need that end market demand. So yard waste recovery right now in the state is pretty good. Why? Anyone know why we have good yard waste recovery in the state? We have a yard waste ban. Yard waste cannot go into landfills. When that ban went into effect, it effectively grew us a composting industry, right? So policy is really important to drive the appropriate behavior that we're looking for. So we've got great yard waste recovery now. Food and wood waste recovery, which are second most category of organics going to landfill, both need improvement. I wanted to give a small snapshot of all the things happening in Detroit. There was recently a convening of all the Detroit teams, either operating out of Detroit or servicing Detroit, that have gone through NextCycle. In terms of the recovery potential, you're looking at about 70,000 tons of paper in Detroit alone, which is pretty remarkable, followed by organics. So again, a huge opportunity. You're going to hear from a Detroit team that's gone through NextCycle addressing the organics space. And then the difference between the two are residential and commercial. So that's really interesting. Again, you see an outsized commercial factor in paper. It's about evenly split for organics, coming out of the home, coming out of the restaurants and institutions. Here's Michigan's MSW disposal stream on the top, 8 million tons. Remember I said we want 2.7 million of those pulled out to reach 45% recovery. Detroit's MSW disposal stream, 530,000 tons. So, you know, a pretty good chunk of the state. Again, we've got our population density there. And, you know, we are tracking, again, this data-driven initiative is looking at how much is there, what's available for recovery. So, you know, you can see some difference. There's those, you know, that other recyclables category. Those are the things that you can't pick up at the curb. That'll be your tires, your mattresses, your electronics, wood waste for recovery. So actually wood waste would be inorganics, but all the others would be in other recyclables. The large rigid plastics that can't fit in a bin. So larger segment in Detroit than in the state. And we've got these breakdowns for every region of the state, and it's really helping us identify where those opportunities are, where those gaps are. These are kind of sneak peeks. We do the gap analysis every couple years. We're in the middle of one now. So some of this is like an early look at the data that we're currently analyzing. So we now have over 200 projects tracked across Michigan that are accelerating recycling and growing the circular economy. So that's impressive. I think there's a lot going on right now. The federal funding coming through, Part 115 passing is going to add to that momentum of opportunity. And we are tracking investment in these projects, and there's over $680 million in investment currently tracked in completed and underway projects in the state. So that's a little snapshot. We're going to have so much more. Again, data, we love data, and there's so much that we can learn from it. But what I want to do now is turn back to our panel. And what we're going to do is they're each a little bit more about the accelerator before I turn it over to them. They each went through a 4 to 6 month accelerator process with a cohort. So there was learning from each other. There was meeting in person for 2.5 days at an accelerator camp where they're getting support with business plan development, with how to give a pitch, how to like ask for what you need in a compelling way so that people will want to come to your, you know, come and provide that investment or whatever it is you need. it opens them up to Eagle funding opportunities. There's like a special pot of money because they're getting vetted, they're getting improved, they're getting, there's feasibility analysis going on. There's all sorts of stuff where when they then apply for a grant, it's a better grant application, right? So this is part of like how this is helping the state reach their goals by helping these really innovative projects come through the system. So what we have here are a few teams and a couple folks that have served on the advisory panels that help shape the program, serve as ambassadors to recruit projects, communities, teams, good ideas. They help screen the applications, and then they serve as coaches and mentors through the process. And then at the end, we do a showcase, which is where you're all invited. The next one is in October, and it's going to be aligned with the Michigan Sustainability Conference up in Gaylord at Treetops. And they will probably serve as judges again and really help create this cool sort of competitive environment where the teams give their pitches and there are awards. So I'm gonna turn it over first to Ricky Blanding from Scrap Soils.
Hello again. Ricky Blanding of Scrap Soils. I am executive director and founder of this Detroit-based nonprofit. We collect residential and commercial pre and post-consumer food waste. During our pilot program, we recovered about 11,000 pounds of waste and are looking to recover around 63,000 pounds in 2 geographies of Detroit starting this year. After support from both NextCycle in terms of funding as well as this cohort, as well as other funding sources, we've been able to really identify what it is that we are doing well and also what the community needs. Our focus on multifamily housing and commercial customers comes from a need of residential buildings that have a whole bunch of people with no backyards that might have a lot of passion about composting, but they kind of throw their hands to the wind and they're like, how do I do this? Also, some of the other organizations haven't always done composting in the best or most accessible way. And so we're trying to bridge that gap and figure out how to serve these businesses and these particular residents.
All right, Carrie, you're up.
Yeah, so I don't know that my story at Padnos is as interesting as my experience at helping evaluate these different tracks or these different proposals. And, what is it that I'm looking for, right? So I'm looking for an idea that resonates, that I think that people can get around. It's compelling, it is emotional. It connects to people and they can see themselves participating with it. I'm looking for something that can be monetized, something that can be scalable. Because if it can't be monetized and scalable, you can have the best intentions in the world of doing good for people and good for the environment, but it's very, very hard to make it actually sustainable without those other legs of that stool. So helping people sometimes refine what it is that's in their head into a path that can be executed and scalable is really important and critical. So that's kind of where I see my role.
Nate.
So for the NextCycle process, I found it to be helpful in that I was getting additional time and ability for people to really dive in instead of just staying at that really surface level, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. But to the point of what Carrie just said, to be able to actually have people who are from this industry or from the work generally around the state to be able to really spend time with you, to cultivate where are those nuggets of things that you can really build on. And for me, the biggest challenge was just trying to take all of the components of what we're doing and put it in a 7-minute pitch. It was, for someone who has a lot to talk about at any given time, it was a good challenge to have. I had to go through probably 25, 30 different rounds of practicing and refining what I was going to say so that I could get everything I needed to say is compact into that 7 minutes. And that was really, really valuable for me because I would not have invested that much time in a pitch. And since that point, I have had a pitch that I have, so I had a full pitch and then I got it down to the 7 minutes. And because of that culling process, I have had a pitch deck that I have been able to adapt and adjust based on whatever audience I'm talking to or any group I'm pitching to. So it was incredibly valuable for me to go through that process alone, to just get clear and succinct in our process for sure.
Great. All right, Claire.
All right, so as working for the city of Ferndale, our community is a population of about 20,000 residents, and we're a small urban community, just about 4 square miles. So it presents a lot of interesting challenges when we talk about scalability. So we launched a food waste collection pilot back in 2021, and we saw overwhelming positive response from our residents. We immediately saw, 400 households sign up within the first 48 hours. And right after that, we had a long wait list of residents that were really excited to participate. So after, as we progressed through our year-long pilot program, we kind of assessed, that we needed to know what to do next, right? We knew we needed to grow, but we weren't sure how. And we knew that in terms of scaling up and collecting, and diverting more food waste, which directly relates to some of the city's climate neutrality goals and, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, that we knew that we wanted to kind of go full speed ahead on organics diversion. So through the Flows program, we were able to do a lot of data collection and analysis to understand like what types of how much really food waste we could collect from different industries, both the commercial side and the residential side. So it was really great to see that, as Elisa mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's kind of an even split. So, we were trying to decide, do we want to focus on residential? Do we want to focus on commercial? And we decided for our specific community, it made sense to kind of do both because we had opportunities to recover kind of the same amount of information from both sectors. So through Flows, being able to understand our potential diversion rates really helped us understand what types of composting technology is out there and how we might want to utilize some of those technologies to process some of our own material on site within our city, so that our compost materials aren't, leaving the city of Ferndale and traveling 40, 50 miles away and we never see them again, but rather we can process them locally and then get to utilize that product kind of for the city, city's opportunities in our landscapes or to give back to our residents and kind of promote that circular economy. And I think a huge asset of, having our pitch deck and also just all of the data collection we were able to do, it really is going to set us up for success to apply for grant opportunities. Working for the city, I think the budgets tend to be tight, so we want to use all the grants that we can get. And some of those grant applications, we really want to make sure that we prove ourselves and that we have, the right amount of information. And we know that our community is ready to show up and support a program like this. And it was great to see that demand was captured. And we just needed to know where to head next. So looking at different types of processing, we kind of landed on the aerated static pile method of composting. I don't know if we talked a little bit about that today or even yesterday through all of the different sessions, but if you have any questions about it, I'm nowhere near an expert, but I can definitely, point you in the right direction. But we really want to look at developing a site within our city to help process more material and help reach our food waste diversion goals.
Right.
And again, Brian Miller with Cascade. So my role in NextCycle is the recycling supply chain track. And being an advisory member, again, I get the unique ability to see these ideas, these new ideas from the creative people in this industry. We're not looking for shovel-ready projects. These are ideas, and how we're able to take these ideas and, and over the course of the program to grow these ideas that one person had, make the connections with other people in the industry, and grow to a scalable project. You know, we're talking about number one, how do you do it? You know, what's the business plan? You know, what's how do the finances look like? Is it sustainable long-term business? But to see the ideas, again, I live in solid waste recycling collection, right? Curbside recycling is what I see every day. And some of these projects really just amaze me to see, you know, some of the unique things that I didn't necessarily understand was a gap, because it's not the world that I live in to see. But yes, see, this is a gap, and see how, you know, the MRC, Eagle, NextCycle are working to solve those. It's incredibly rewarding for me to be a part of it.
Awesome. All right. So
Jump in,
Yeah,
Brian, do you mind
please.
sharing a bit more about the post-consumer content recycling carts and some of that work Cascade is doing?
Yeah, so again, we make the roll carts, as many of you know. So, you know, traditionally, you know, we use as much PCR. Again, Cascade is been focused on sustainability. We're a triple bottom line company, people, planet, profit, and ad order. So we have a corporate goal is 25% post-consumer in all of our products. Now, that can be difficult because we work with OEM suppliers that say we can use 0. But then in our roll carts, we can kind of control that. So historically, we've always used, you know, ground up old carts, ground up old buckets. The HDPE is typically what we move with. That's what we've used for the past 25 years, and we've had our up on the back. We're doing a good job. And then, you know, the China stuff happened, the National Historic Green Fence, and some of this material wasn't getting shipped over to China anymore. It started, you know, piling up the MRFs, and we partner with the APR, with the recycling partnership, and then our biggest customer is WM. And so we have this bulky rich HDPE stacking up across the country. We're getting to the point where we're going to have to pull it from collection programs nationwide unless we can do something with it. Cascade, you make a 40-pound HDPE product. What can you do? But for us, if you think about your garbage can, it gets beat around, especially with the move to automation and the automated arms. It's a very abusive environment. It's got a 10-year warranty. And so we have got to make sure any material we introduce is going to hold up to the 10-year warranty. So again, in collaboration with Waste Management, the APR, the recycling partnership, we talked through, we designed a material. We were able to take that material that was sitting at those MRFs, find a way to put some additives to it and get it to something that we can use at a level of 10% in all of our carts. So we're taking material that's recovered in curbside bins at the street, turning it into new bins that are going to be out for recycling again. So it's really, but what are the outcomes? That's really great idea, or great example, I guess I'll say, of the circular economy. But what it really was is creating a pull-through demand for a material that wasn't easily recyclable. So that was incredibly rewarding for us. So we started in 2020, did 250,000 pounds. Last year we did 3 million. We received an Eagle grant to put a material silo in for this material, and we expect it to be 4 to 5 million as we move forward.
Can I add something to what you just said? Because
Sure.
I think it's important, and I don't know that we talk about it enough. So, you know, we have those chasing arrows on the plastics that we have in our kitchens, our bathrooms, our laundry rooms. And number 2 is HDPE. And what I find is the average person thinks it's number 2 plastic. That's what it is. Trust me when I tell you there are hundreds of different types of number 2 plastic, and they are not all the same at all. There's chemistry involved. And the number 2 plastic that Cascade needs for their carts to be able to withstand what he's saying, durability, but that means sun, that means freezing temperatures, that means getting grabbed and beat up really hard every day so that your cart doesn't break. What they use and why that their work is so freaking cool is nowhere near what that bottle is in your laundry room. So the amount of innovation and effort that they had to put in to create a compatibilized HDPE to utilize that, I mean, you're not bragging enough, quite frankly, because it is a really big deal. And all those bottles that you have, they have labels on them, they have polypropylene caps on them. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen to make that possible. And when we don't understand that, when we don't understand it, we can't solve, right? We can't come up with the solution. It's not a one-to-one, like, easy thing. So thank you, Cassie. That's leading the way.
Like Carrie said, you know,
Yes.
we come to us trying to sell us material all the time. We have HDPE. Well, we need, you know, HDPE is like this. We need this. We need a 4 to 5 mil 0.93 to 0.97 density that's here in order to meet those requirements.
Yep. And I really, when Kate asked this morning at her keynote, what 3 words come up for you, and you think of plastics, the 2 that immediately came to my head are complex and challenging, right? So that really, you just heard here, like there's a lot. Carrie just applauded Brian. I just want to recognize that Carrie just got an award, and I don't think, yes, applause. There is no one that exemplifies. So NextCycle Michigan's tagline is partnership and innovation. And it's what we try to cultivate throughout the process. And I don't think there's anyone that embodies that more than Carrie in her role at PADNAS. So I would love you to take a few minutes and tell us, well, you could not possibly tell us all, but some of the cool things that you're super excited about that you're doing at PADNAS, and maybe preface it by what PADNAS does. I know you did at the intro, but just another brief, like within the context of your work.
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief. So PADNAS by nowhere means is the largest recycler in the US, but we do have the most diverse processing capability of any recycler. So what that means is we have intimate knowledge on all the different material streams. That allows us to do this collaboration piece. It allows us to be able to look at something at its end of life and solve super complex problems. So an example of that would be automobiles. We recycle about 2,000 automobiles at the end of life every day. Okay. Now we are really good at getting the metals out of those cars, whether it's ferrous or non-ferrous. We have very elaborate technology systems that allow us to remove about 98% of both the ferrous, being it has iron, a magnet sticks to it, or non-ferrous means it's an element on the periodic table that does not have iron in it, like aluminum. So you have to have different technology to remove both these things. We were really good at that. We were founded in 1905. We're still privately held, family owned, all that good stuff. That's been developed over 100 years. But guess what is in your car that's not metallic? About 1,000 things, like literally. And some of them aren't very good things, like PVC or fire retardants or PFAS. And all these words, right? So about 5 years ago or so, I was having lunch with one of our interns, and they looked at me and they said, I'm kind of bothered by something. And what? We're throwing away, we're landfilling like all this stuff. And now that's a bad word in my industry, right? Because we're not it's landfill cover. Yes, it is landfill cover. It is helping the landfill perform. It's important because as long as we are landfilling things, we want to capture that methane gas. We want it not to smell for the neighbors of the landfill. It's important, it has a value. But then I found out after a little bit more research that there's 10 billion pounds going to landfill from just this ASR, right? That's a lot. That's like a lot more than the straws we manufacture or the bottles we manufacture. It's a lot. So I wanted to solve that. And they're doing it in part in Europe, but the economics of how they do that in Europe is so radically different than what we have here in the US that we had to unwrap the available technology to be able to figure out what to do with it. We have a patent pending now. We did, after about 2.5 years, we had a really cool program we did with US Cars. So that allowed us to have Ford, GM, and Stellantis at the table at the same time. So again, collaboration, you have to have all of the people. We had to have engineers, we had to have designers, we had to have procurement, we had to have all the stakeholders around the table at the same time, up and down the supply chain. We brought Eastman Chemical into the mix because we know that mechanical recycling is super critically important, but it's not the only technology that's going to get us to where we need to go. We need to be able to collaborate. And you know what the biggest challenge was in the beginning? It was actually breaking down the walls at PADNAS and the walls at Eastman and the walls at each of our big automakers. They did not think about it as proprietary because we're all ingrained, like we're for-profit, all of us are for-profit industry. And if we're holding tight, so tight to our IP, we're so afraid, right? Like of giving away the secret sauce, you can't collaborate, right? And that was not easy. That was actually the biggest challenge. It wasn't solving the problem. It was breaking those barriers down so that we could have a real conversation And yeah, we had to have NDAs in place. We had to like a lot of that, right? And it's taken a long time, but we have successfully finished the project. We've we've served proof of concept. We've recycled about 1 million pounds of that plastic already to date. And we're getting ready for that to get large scale. Now, getting that approval, we have 19 automotive approvals today. It takes about 2 to 3 years to get an automotive approval. So just understand like what we're up against is not easy. It'll be, it's going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. Bring it on.
That's really beautiful to hear you say, and I want to add to the lack of collaboration component. I mentioned earlier that Scrap Souls is really collaborative, but I've definitely run into these super gatekeepy, super like, I'm not going to tell you how I'm doing this, right? And it's like, especially in composting where there's so much up and down about exactly the best way to do it. But then when you hear the experts speak and the scientists speak, it's a lot more accessible than some of these companies are making it. And one advantage that Scrap Souls has, number one, by being new, and number two, by not coming from like a strong composting background professionally, is that we've had to collaborate in order to cement this organization and give it, like you said, the legs of the stool. And it really taught us very early on to be collaborative and to attract other collaborative members. And I also want to say that what NextCycle gave Scrap Soils was a way for us to communicate internally and externally what we do. It's not enough for me to really be passionate about it. It's not enough for members of my team to have the components. We all need to be able to say the same group of information and know that that clog fits into what the community needs, So thank you to NextCycle for that too.
Yeah, and that's, I'm gonna add to that, what Ricky said, that one of the coolest things for me was last year we're at the Kellogg Center for this conference, and that's when they did the pitches, early pitches, right? The first pitches as everybody was doing the projects, and we sat in a room for the better part of 4 to 5 hours, and everybody gave pitches. But what was interesting is the conversations of all, what were there, eight or nine projects groups were in the room, and the individual projects they give their presentation, and then the other project team members were helping with ideas and making connections, and it was just, here we are, we just have 8 different unique individuals in the room, but the synergies we're creating just in that room, and that's really what NextCycle is about, is helping make those connections, helping knock down those walls.
And then it's something, just so you know, that many accelerators are sort of like on a rolling basis, and we very intentionally design these as cohorts. There's a start, there's a finish, there is a group of people that get to meet each other and learn from each other. And we actually saw in Colorado, which was our first NextCycle that RRS ran, where this small, really cool cannabis packaging company was having this intense conversation with a chemical recycling company with, $100 million on the line. And, the cannabis company was seeing exponential growth, and this other company was trying to land their siting and their feedstocks. It was fascinating that they had stuff to talk about. So you just never know, and get that co-learning is just so cool. Yeah.
I know it's probably not time for comment, but I just can't help myself. So, +1 on that. Last year I sat on the NextCycle pitch sessions, and I listened to Mount Pleasant talk about their food waste and their collaborative effort on that. And I'm from Wisconsin, and I have a daughter that works in the wastewater industry, and I immediately went back, and now that ball is rolling, and I connected her with the Mount Pleasant people to actually have a conversation about how you handle waste and food scraps and how you can do that at a wastewater treatment facility. So the ripple effects are not just here, they're definitely moving beyond. So that was exciting.
Love that. And there's actually what Kara's talking about, there's a term for that, which is pre-competitive collaboration, those silos breaking down. And that's something that RRS actually excels in. We work with a lot of trade associations and really help them see the value. Yeah, sign all the NDAs you want, start talking to each other. So it's something that we know is essentially important, particularly in driving recycling and recovery. So I want to shift the conversation. I think I want to give Janae a little more time to talk about her business model. I mean, there is, in your brief introduction, you really did not get to shine in terms of what you are doing and how it works and how you're closing the loop.
Okay, so we started out as a cut and sew manufacturer back in 2016. We actually started in my kitchen with one client, and the whole idea was we wanted to do that contract work. We wanted to be able to create apparel and accessories in my town and be able to support growing living wage jobs in an industry that globally is very much based in low wage and slave labor. Specifically talking about the fashion, apparel industry, and accessories. So that was really the impetus to what we were doing. But what we found really quickly was that there are so many industries and there's so much textile waste, and there's really no avenue except for throwing it out for the large part. There are definitely companies that are diverting their materials, grinding it up and turning it into, fill or things that might be in cars and insulation, et cetera, but not at all enough to be able to have an impact on the textile waste that's happening in our state. And so what kept happening was we kept getting manufacturers coming to us and saying, I have, thousands of pounds of material I'm throwing away every week. And we would go out and look, and sure enough, in their trash bins are thousands of pounds of textiles that there really are no opportunities for doing anything with. So we started collecting the materials to the degree we could and curating what we had. So at this point, we have about 200,000 pounds of materials. We work, our largest supplier is Steelcase. So we have a lot of upholstery fabric. We have a lot of vinyl, a lot of leather, about 25,000 pounds of leather scrap. And again, highly curated because there are so many tens of thousands of pounds that are being thrown out every week. So we also, our very first material was actually grain bags from breweries because they were getting all of these woven polypropylene bags to brew their beer, but then they were not able to recycle it due to stitching and some other factors involved in how the material was once they were done using it. And so we started making growler holders and 4-pack holders for the breweries, selling them back to them. We started making bags where we lined it in the woven polypropylene sacks. We had surplus material from other contracts we were doing. And so we started just matching these materials to make whatever we could with our staff, who are incredibly talented and come from around the world to bring their skills here, which is quite an incredible thing once you start to put the call out, asking for people who know how to sew. There are so many people who have that skill set and talent. And so we started growing our product lines and eventually really quickly moved into promotional products. And so we started making tote bags and zipper pouches, laptop cases, all different sizes. If you came and needed something, we pretty much adapted to make it work. Starting very small batch, which of course is incredibly expensive. And then we're working with materials that are very costly to work with because sometimes you have to clean them, like the grain bags or other materials, bless you, that you get in very small quantities. So we might get, I might get 500 pounds of material at a time on rolls, but I might get 3 yards of one thing and 17 yards of this or 200 yards of this other material. So the inherent challenges that we're dealing with is that we have everybody's waste, much to the point of plastics. I mean, we get a little bit of everything. And so one of the things that we started to do as well was work on using billboard vinyl. The good thing about billboard vinyl is it's huge, it's 48 feet by 14 feet high. So it's a huge piece of vinyl. It is very reusable. We started working with that material, and what's great about it is consistent. So the colors are different, the cut is different, but it's the same exact material. So you can actually build systems around it, and you can actually get scale from it. Whereas working with our upholstery fabric, leathers, et cetera, is a lot more complicated because you have to adapt based on the different weights of material, if it's knit, if it's woven, all of those factors very much impact the kind of product you're going to make. And so B2B and direct batch orders of making large, maybe not large for others, but hundreds or into the thousands of products is what has been largely our bread and butter. So we've made those products, sold them back to Steelcase that they then use in their supply chains around customer gifts, employee gifts, if they're hosting or sponsoring an event. They'll purchase all of the promotional product, not all, but a lot of the promotional products through us, utilizing their own waste, which is a beautiful approach to circular economy, finding ways to repurpose it back into your own systems. We built a relationship with Outfront Media, which is the largest billboard company in the country. So we now divert all of the billboard waste, surplus billboards, which are in the thousands every year, for Kent County. And so we are constantly then trying to go, okay, what's the output on the other end? So we design grocery bags that we make out of them. We design bags for collecting recyclables, whether it's in multifamily housing or just in single family housing, whatever type of scenario.
Favorite bag.
It is a really great
It's-
bag.
It's got a handle on the bottom so you can tip it in your bin.
It's perfect.
Like,
And it
it's
carries,
so cool.
it carries a lot of material. And so we are actually working on a contract where we're gonna make a couple thousand bags for City of Detroit to be able to have for multifamily housing, to collect recyclables. We've done a project in Ann Arbor for that. Unfortunately, been working really hard in Kent County, but can't seem to do that in our own community. But whatever, that's for another day. So we're constantly trying to find markets. So we're doing a lot of backwards design, which is one of the biggest challenges with doing upcycling, because we're using it in its existing form, right? So we're not grinding it up and turning it into other things yet. That is one of the ways that we have to look at to adapt and figure out how to divert material at scale. But for right now, we're trying to figure out how can we repurpose what we already have to make things that we already need, but just replace what you're using. If you're using a reusable bag, but it was made for 50 cents by someone who wasn't treated well, and those dyes went into the waterways over in Afghanistan or India or whatever, and it's not durable, it's not really gonna last, is that $2 bag actually worth it? We would like to be part of educating the community, legislators, decision makers, corporate leaders, to be able to say it is worth investment in living wage jobs and in a sustainable supply chain that is not just about some creative fun, oh, look at this person over here on this random side. It is actually the future. As we build these systems out, we have to really look at that long-term investment and say, yes, it might be a reusable bag and it might seem like something throwaway, but if you're spending $10,000 on kitschy bullshit that no one really wants or needs just to put your logo on it, maybe look at making one or two things that have a stronger value chain and investing in local manufacturing, living wage jobs, and honoring the planet in the process. And so that's really what we're offering. We also do direct-to-consumer products. It's a far smaller scale, unless we're able to access some kind of miracle marketing dollars somewhere, because breaking through the marketplace to be able to, let people know about our products is very challenging because it's incredibly saturated. So we're constantly trying to build that side of our work because we can actually get a profit on that side usually. It's really, frankly, quite creative and fun for our staff because they get to design things that are maybe 10, 15, 20, or 100 units of something that are beautiful, very small batch fabrics that we would never get access to otherwise because they cost hundreds of dollars per yard. And so we get to create really unique products that put a whole bunch of different materials together, which is really quite beautiful and has a strong value chain behind it.
And it's still less than some of the major brands when it comes to handbags. I'll just say, yeah, I feel like I save money when I buy your product.
So I love what you just brought in terms of living wage and equitable work. And I know you've centered that. NextCycle really does works hard to center diversity, equity, and inclusion in program design, in team selection. The gap analysis shows us where underserved communities are. I know that both Padnas and Cascade do some really cool, innovative stuff in the DEI space. And I would love for each of you, starting with Brian, to talk a little bit about the efforts at your company.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we do. Again, I mentioned we're a triple bottom line company. People, planet, profit in that order. That was Fred Keller's vision when he started the business in 1973. And he really walked the talk. So we've got several programs that we've been doing. I've been there for 23 years and they were there before I started. The first one was a felony reentry program. So we found that felons, they had to check that box on the resume. And that was something that would eliminate them right out of the job market right away. So that was something that where we got rid of that box. Because we wanted to encourage, the people that were looking to better themselves. And so took it a step further, started as part-time as a full-time social worker from the state of Michigan that was housed at Cascade. We did a prisoner reentry program. So this is people coming out of incarceration, and then the biggest challenge is when they get released from prison, they, again, good luck finding a job. It's really what it is. So again, we saw that as a need. We saw a lot of people that wanted to change their lives, and through a partnership with Goodwill and some other companies in Grand Rapids. This was mid-90s. Developed our reentry program, and I can say there's some people that you go on our website, you can see some of the stories that are in executive level management that went through the program. Nobody knows who they are unless they come out and say, I was part of that program. It's not like, so it's really rewarding to see that, the social side of it. Fred's vision was, a business can be profitable, but also take care of the environment and take care of the community as well. That was his, he'll tell you that was his test case. His business was a test case. He's been, here we are 50 years, 50-year anniversary this year, and kind of proved it. So.
Yeah, so similarly, Padnos was founded as a triple bottom line company, and I could go through so many awesome stories. There's a lot of reasons why they get all of my time and attention, way over 40 hours a week. I love it. And it's those things, prisoner reentry, for all of that. But I think that COVID created a whole new level of awareness for us as an organization. We started to take our DEI journey a lot more seriously in the last few years. We made sure, we're nowhere near done. Like, if anything, I think what we've learned is that there's a lot we still have bias around. There's a lot we don't know. And that it's not like you take a class in DEI and like, oh, I'm woke. I mean, it doesn't work like that. Like it is a journey, and you're never done with that journey. Not ever. I mean, the reason why we call it bias is because we don't know we have it. And if you think, like, as soon as you figure out one piece, there's another piece to work on. So it's a practice, and it has to be intentional. So we started with training our executive team and our senior leaders. That is ongoing. I mean, we regularly bring in speakers on DEI topics from different areas, different ideas, different concepts to train us. Then we'll take the best of that and roll it out. So every single team member is part of that. They get to watch, whether it's videos or be in courses. The courses have a few test questions at the end just to make sure that they're getting the concepts. We have affinity groups now. So we have young professional affinity groups, BIPOC groups, LGBTIQIA groups. Did I get that right? I probably didn't. And all of the senior leaders, whether they consider themselves of identifying with that group or not, have to participate with those groups, because being an ally is just as important as having the group. Like, it's not to really have people feel like they belong in an organization. You got to listen. Like, you don't get to be the one that talks all the time. So that, to us, like, to me, those are the things that I'm most proud of. Yeah, we pay for continuing education. Everyone who works at Padnos gets profit sharing. We always pay a living wage. Even our interns, I think, are at $19 an hour now. But beyond, there's like so much more. There's just so much more that has to happen than just those things. We pay 75% so if you have a child, so my children, this is very pressing to me because they're 13, 15, and 16. My children will get to go to a Michigan State institution as long as they get a C, which is a challenge for one of the three. As long as they can get a C, they will get to go. 75% of that tuition will be paid by Padnos for my kids, right? So that's a big deal. I mean, I was a high school dropout personally. So, like, that is meaningful to me. So there is no reason why, our kids won't be educated. And that builds a culture. Just does. It's just different.
he said, it's creating the culture, it's continuing to talk about it, have those difficult discussions, have that communication. We do the Institute for Healing Racism, and they bring in actors to portray situations that have happened in Cascades plants related to racism or sexism or whatever it is. And it makes your skin crawl. But then it's that education that's not
Most
okay.
people don't
That will
know.
not be tolerated. It's like you said, it's rewarding to be a part of an organization that does that kind of thing.
Yeah, and as far as what Scrap Souls does for diversity and inclusion, we approach it differently being so new. So we don't have the resources to pay for our children, our employees for the tuition, which is super cool. But we do realize that there's serious socioeconomic gaps in bubbles of Detroit. If you're not from Detroit, you think guns, violence, and just no money, right? And when you go to Detroit, you realize that some of the most wealthy communities are there, right next to exactly what you're afraid of. And it's getting less disparate over time, but Scrap Souls would like to bridge those gaps. So that's one way that we focus on inclusion. And as far as diversity and equity, within our company, our entire board is POC, which was completely unintentional. But moving forward, I take my board out, I think about ways to acknowledge them in very personal ways. I give them time, and I try to allow everyone to feel like they have a voice to speak up. And I think that when we get someone who is not, for instance, POC, we've already started to develop a type of communication where even white people will feel safe with us. We don't want there to be any of this, take care of this group of people, but not this group of people. We want there to be a completely safe environment. And I think that outside, diversity inclusion is bigger than the word racism. Diversity inclusion includes people from all walks of life, right?
All the
That
systems.
Exactly, that really need attention in ways that we're not used to giving it. So, yeah.
Kira, is there a question you would like to ask of our esteemed panel?
Put on the spot. I mean, I'm actually curious to continue this DEI conversation, and Claire and Janae, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of your story of how you've incorporated diversity, equity, and inclusion, or experienced it within your work.
Yeah, I think in terms of inclusion, like a big thing that when we were setting up our initial programs, we tried to understand is that we want to make our programs as accessible as possible. And with accessibility comes flexibility and allowing folks to kind of work within what they have. So our compost programs are free to our residents. That was very intentional. We wanted to set up a system that wouldn't have a barrier of cost so that everyone could participate equally. Another, point of inclusion that we really tried to focus on was the time frame. So our program itself is a food scraps drop off program. And, we made sure that we had our locations very evenly spread throughout our community so that everyone had an equal distance to a drop off location. That was very intentional, as well as allowing kind of a freedom of drop off for, they're open all times of day. So, people working different types of jobs, it's not like they have to try to squeeze in a specific time frame and all of those, little pieces, they can really add up to make it feel like this a program might not be for you. But having, a accessible program where people can really, collect their food scraps at home and they can take it to the drop-off location really whenever they're available, I think is a piece that we're pretty proud of, just so that we don't have to try to encourage folks to participate as they need to. And also, I think there's a lot of, especially, folks in the kind of environmental, if people identify as an environmentalist, there can be a lot of pressure that people feel to always do the right thing. So especially in terms of like when we went through developing survey questions to gain feedback and data from residents, we really tried to approach it in a way that we don't want to shame people for not always participating correctly, or people come from different levels of backgrounds. Some people were like they call themselves expert composters, so they already knew what to do, and then some people that have never heard of it before. And and really trying to, meet people where they're at and also, allow people the ability to mess up and say that that's okay. Because even some conversations that I had with residents, they would tell me that they felt so guilty that, they didn't take out their compost through the winter time because they didn't want to go to the park because it was too cold. And I'm saying that's okay. You don't have to be perfect all the time. But even just recognizing being able to have access to the program and utilize it when it's right for you still makes a huge difference. So I think that's kind of a part of this in a different way.
And to add to that, you also mentioned kind of this decentralized model, and that's something that Scrap Soils has also really, we've restructured what we do around that. We want to make sure that people can actually put their hands into the compost. We know that there's wrong ways to do compost as well as any materials processing process, but it's not something that people can't learn. And if you put too many walls between the process and the people, they're just not going to care. It's going to be that much harder to introduce them to the issues that we're trying to solve. So, by being in different places and different geographies, that incentivizes people to first of all, just interact with the compost, even if I'm not saying anything, like they're there and they get to fall in love there. And then that makes it that much easier to introduce them to not only our services, but also our educational programming and so forth.
I just love that you said falling in love.
That's what it could really be. And I think that if we looked at it that personally and looked away from the numbers and just long enough to understand from an introductory level, what are we trying to introduce to people who don't care yet,
Yeah, no.
I think in a lot of ways too, like composting can be very life-changing for people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the first interaction with that circular economy and really connecting with the environment. And like I've heard a lot of firsthand accounts from our residents that said that some of them even chose to move to the city of Ferndale because they knew that there was a compost program available. And just sharing like their kind of personal relationship with it, where they say, as much as things are going on in the world and as much as I, try to, purchase plastic-free groceries and products, and it can be so difficult to always do the right thing, but at least knowing that I can compost and contribute to climate action in a small way, I think really gives people hope. It does.
Great. Janae.
So for us on one level, we have constantly focused on ensuring that we are representative of our community, both in those who are working in our facility. We've always maintained a majority of people of color as our staff. We've paid living wages intentionally to try to, again, counter the way that the entire industry works, even if it's just in a small way. We intentionally find suppliers and vendors who are that are businesses that are owned or run, led by people of color, by women, to really encourage that we're walking the same talk that we are asking for others to do. We are, as we gain additional resources and opportunities, we are always looking at how we can offset costs. I think one of the biggest challenges I've found is I've talked to hundreds of designers and entrepreneurs over the last 7 years. And over half of those were designers and entrepreneurs of color who are very under-resourced systemically to be able to afford the process of design, prototyping, production planning, and then actually going through a production process to launch a product, even to test it in the marketplace. Because no one's going to be able to go over to China and get 10,000 units if you haven't even done a small run. And you want them to be done well and professionally, and you want to have a really quality product. And the biggest thing that has broken my heart was the challenge of being able to, who's going to offset the cost to be able to do that. And so as we transition from a for-profit to a nonprofit, that is one of the key things that we have been driven since go, is how do we actually obtain the kind of resources to offset costs so that we can actually work with those designers and entrepreneurs, whether they have an existing product and they want to weave in upcycled textiles, or they want to design a brand new product utilizing as much upcycled material as possible. we can help facilitate that for them, but we need someone to pay that because we have our people we need to pay. And everyone is valuing that. Those clients are valuing that. They understand that they don't want to be part of an oppressive system, yet we have to find those resources. And so this is where foundations and grants are incredibly helpful for us to be able to offset, because if you don't ever invest in equitable solutions, you won't get those outcomes. And so the plastics industry has been subsidized globally to be able to make really cheap materials and get to the volume it has. So we need to subsidize equity. We need to invest in those individuals that have not had those resources or access to those tools. So we are constantly looking at, we have a Kendall College of Art and Design. They are teaching fashion design, they're teaching furniture design, they're teaching design of all these things. Well, they have a problem. They don't have a lot of people of color in their programs. Well, we know a lot of people who have incredibly creative ideas for product development who could learn design, but they need to crosswalk those design programs, those university and college programs with the community and the natural resources that we already have, which is the people and the talent. And so one of the things we proved during COVID was we actually have everything we need to solve our challenges, but we need to look around and put them together in different ways. So when COVID hit, of course, like many other manufacturers, we had the facility, we had the machines, we had the materials. And then we said, who knows how to sew? Who wants to help put all these together? And we had 200 people that came to us and said, we know how to sew. They were willing to volunteer. And then very quickly, we found that there was an actual market for this. And we started hiring, we hired 25 people and we're working full time, making over 1,000 masks a day for people, many of them had never sewn professionally ever. And so, you know, we have those materials, and I think that is what we are pitching, is that if we have some of the subsidy and the resources and we put it directly towards BIPOC communities, LGBTQIA communities, we put this towards people who might have physical disabilities, immigrants, refugees. We have the talent, we have the materials in town. All we have to do is put it together and actually create that system and invest in that system so that we can get it off the ground and show that there is scale and capacity to actually do cut and sew manufacturing in the United States again. So that's how we approach DEI and equity, really from a very systemic lens.
I would love to open it up to other questions now. I mean, I have more, but I want to give you all a chance. So does anyone have any questions for anyone or all of the panel?
Janae. I found a place where they make decals. Because
Decals.
my wife wanted to have her college logo on
Sure.
her window. And we found a guy in Cadillac who makes whatever you got a picture of the logo, the school logo, or he did it beautifully. He said, you know, all those all the writing stuff you see on these big trucks are decals. Is that a source of what you call that a feedstock? I mean, have you ever looked into that?
The soft side trucks, are you talking about the material that is used for like semi trucks that's soft, like a vinyl type material? Is that what you mean?
Well, it's to advertise, like Holland Motor Freight.
Oh,
It's something they stick right on the back of the
yeah,
truck.
those types of
Side.
materials are not what we use. We very much focus in on textiles. So I would say most of ours is post-industrial, so pre-consumer, but billboards would be the only thing that we really acquire that is used per se, in that it had been outside. So we don't work with any of that other material because it's typically not, we can't sew.
The adhesive would make it extraordinarily
Yeah.
difficult.
But I mean, you're in that.
But there are
space.
materials all the time. I
Like
mean,
the trucking, there must be one big major manufacturer that'll put out, you know, these huge decals. That's what the young man called it.
well,
It's
there's a
everything
lot
that's
of.
on the side of the back of the truck.
Yeah,
behind the
mesh, a
motor.
lot of mesh and sign material. We work with that all the time. Actually, it makes really great bags because the mesh is really cool to use. It's a great beach bag in particular. Yeah. But the mesh material is really nice, it's pliable. You can fold it, work with it, you know, inside out, etc. So we are constantly trying to find ways to utilize when you put up a billboard, when you have signs, when you have banners, when you have a construction site and you have all that stuff wrapping all of the fencing. If you could then get that to us and we make bags and then you put your logo or your tag on it. And then now you have marketing for your own stuff. If you want to give things away, you want to say thank you to customers. When you build a new building and you want to give all the residents a new bag, you can have, this was part of what went into making this building or whatever. Anytime we can utilize the materials that are already here for what we need, the better. That's going into our landfill. That's obviously a better carbon footprint. It's local, it's supporting jobs, all of that. So there are more textiles than you think.
Sure.
You know, case in point billboards, a lot of people don't even know that that's a vinyl. They're like, oh, I didn't have any clue. Because it's just something, unless you're in that industry, you don't pay attention to. So, and then getting into that is the idea of how do you design that for the end use? So how do you design a billboard so it's not just white and bland, because now your bags are going to be white and bland at the end. How do you embed color? How do you have gradient in that so that the bags are actually really interesting and each one's unique, and tells a really beautiful story about your brand and how you value whatever you're doing out in the world. You're thinking about how to repurpose that for its second life.
So speaking about those, it just so happens that in a side job, I've had a lot of jobs, which probably lends itself well to problem solving, but I used to put lettering on fire and trucks and emergency vehicles. So a little bit familiar with those stickers that you're talking about. It is made out of a vinyl and it has a strong adhesive on it. And then you're using
Strongest what?
adhesive, a strong adhesive. And then you're covering it over and you're using heat, but use heat to remove it, use heat to apply it. That is a perfect example of where I say that you can't solve these problems all in just a bubble. So the first step is 90% of those labels, stickers, whatever, are made out of vinyl, which is polyvinyl chloride, right? That isn't a great material for a lot of reasons. Now, it's good for one reason, it's cheap. It's cheap and it's durable. That's good. But it's bad because our friends it's hard to recycle. I mean, and then you put adhesive on it, now it's really hard to recycle. And our friends in different molecular / chemical recycling industries to date aren't real excited about it because it's very corrosive. And if you heat it up, it kills people because it gases, right? So maybe, but it's a challenge because if we all of a sudden say, okay, well now all the lettering needs to be made out of a different material, now it's going to cost more to put lettering in our emergency vehicles, right? I'd love to look at that as a problem just because it'd be interesting, but it's very complicated because those letters now get cut out. So there's a skeleton that's left. That skeleton little piece, it's got adhesive, it's got backing on it. It's, it's got layers, like that's a hot mess is what that is.
Hopefully not too hot.
Exactly.
Hopefully not too hot.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
Question for Claire. Who's acting as the hauler? Is your city acting as the hauler for your compost?
We
site?
are partnered with My Green Michigan for our program currently. So they're really flexible in terms of our program creation and allowing us to kind of shift our locations around. And as we kind of find what fits well for us, now we're a little bit more settled now that we've kind of been going for a year. But it was really important up front to kind of have that flexibility and also make sure that our, feedstock that we're collecting goes and is turned into certified compost.
And then one other question, at the community drop-off sites, how prevalent is contamination?
Very low, we've seen, luckily. That was definitely a lot of conversations that we had at the start. We were a little bit hesitant with the drop-off model just because the bins being in public spaces. Our bins are located in the parking lots of our city parks. And so just knowing that, they're open, they're available to the public, they don't have locks on them or anything like that. We were definitely a little hesitant, as was our city leadership, but we kind of took the leap of faith and, you have to put trust in your community and know that they'll kind of deliver. And that's exactly what we saw. I think, even just the process of a drop-off compost program, those that are participating do have a level of care
to separate all their food scraps at home, bring them to the location, drop them off, take their bin home, rinse the bin. You know, there's a lot of effort there. And so we saw that with the proper education up front and making sure that folks know exactly what the acceptable materials are, that really helped reduce contamination down the line. And we also made sure too, if anyone's looking at, you know, setting up a drop-off program, you've got to have trash receptacles nearby because you don't want those bins just to be utilized as a trash can for folks that aren't participants, but might be, you know, trying to get rid of their dog poop bag or something like that. So just being very intentional about the setups of the drop-off locations, you know, is important for contamination purposes.
And I want to add to something else you said too, mentioning you have to trust your community. It's like there's times where we have moved forward with certain pieces of our model, introducing our service to prioritize residents versus commercial members at first. And we got a lot of pushback from other composters. Well, why didn't you go commercial if you have an actual space to process? And it really was, we know that we're trying to impact the people of this community, and trusting that allowed us to push forward and discover so much more than we could have if we would have went by the book right off the bat, you know. So yeah, there's spaces and places that you could take more of those risks and others that you probably shouldn't, but I'm happy to hear that Ferndale's doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much need for residential composting as well. And, you know, if we're having a hard time, you know, spreading that to kind of the business side of things, if there's a huge resident population in Ferndale that is participating in composting, when they visit their local restaurants and bars, they'll be asking, are you guys composting? If not, you should. I compost at my, you know, at my house, and it feels like you should probably be doing that here too. So it just
Shame
really
on you.
starts to spread. And it puts more kind of pressure of on the community and
But
on
you
the
like
local
their
businesses, which is a good thing. You know, it really, you start to see it spread.
So this is for Claire. I can comment on how collaborative you are because I was able to do a phone conversation with you about composting.
Good to see
So I
you.
want to thank you for that. And my question is for scrap soils because you talked about like really impacting the people and you don't want to have the walls and the barrier. And I know you mentioned education, and I wanted to hear you tell me a little bit more about the education that you provide and if it is helping to educate people on the whole process of composting. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And like, is it,
Yeah.
when do you educate them how to drop it off in the bucket? Or are you educating them on more of the whole process?
So yes to all of that. Like
Okay.
we're educating on the basic level of the do's and don'ts of composting just to interact with our service. That information is also sent out just on our social media, just for anyone that interacts with our social media. So that gives them a good base understanding of like how to and how not to compost, as well as what and what not to put into your compost. We do share our educational programs, like our actual classes. We share that on social media and to a newsletter if people request it. So we do like vermicomposting education, backyard basic composting, in partnerships with schools and organizations in the area. So Keep Growing Detroit, we just did a Let It Rot composting class, and they'll be bringing us back. We're working on a few other partnerships with a few other schools known around the city and outside of the city. So yeah, it really is multiple levels of education. And I'm happy that you acknowledged just the do's and don'ts piece as an educational piece. It really is. It's like, how do you tell somebody to do this service, you know?
And
I
I
have a
appreciate that you
question
do
about
that
that.
educational component, because at some point in their lives, they may decide they're not gonna home compost.
Right.
But that helps the haulers.
Right.
With contamination later on down the road, especially if they're young people. So I appreciate your whole scale of education. Nice
Yes.
job.
Yes, and also like during our pilot, composting all that waste was totally fortifying, but it'll also break your back, right? And it'll break your back a little bit less if people know to at least chop up the coconut. Like, let's not roll off, right? Let's just chop it up, and then everybody's happier. So that level of education became gleamingly important at the very beginning. And like, I think, yeah, it just makes it more accessible, like less that you have to explain if they already know.
I know we're gonna run out of time, but I have a question I have to ask.
Yeah.
So I think about recycling infrastructure all the time, and one of our biggest challenges in the state and the country is that it's different everywhere. And so it's really hard to educate because it's slightly different rules depending on where you're at. I can see like composting in comparison is in its infancy, right? But I know there's many different types of composting. I know just enough to be dangerous, but that means that if I compost with you, it might be different than what I do at home,
Right.
just a little bit. And it might be different than what I would do if I used MSU's composting or if I was over here. Do you think that do you worry about that? And is that something we should be worried about? Is it now the time to try to get more alignment on the ways we compost, or is it not important?
I don't worry about it as long as people are composting and then they have the resources to ask questions and make sure that they're doing it right. There are many different ways to compost, but when those ways conflict, it usually just means like, oh, you can't put this much milk, or I can only put a tablespoon versus a cup. It's like, it's so granular that it's more important that we actually do the work, right? So in terms of our education, we're actually trying to partner with compost experts, gardening experts, farms, they have agreed to work with us. Even members of NextCycle have agreed to work with us to give us a backbone of how we're educating. I come right up front and I say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. And then there's, I'm sure, a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know that I don't know. I think that
I love that.
educators, right,
It's so
like,
true.
because I don't have a degree in composting, and I think educators being out front about that is the first step in teaching people like, okay, here's your foot in the door. And now I've given you access to the people who really do know on a very scientific level about this process. But they've vetted my processes that I'm teaching you, and we have all agreed that this is right,
And we have the infrastructure here to do this.
Right, exactly. So that's, I think, just transparency and honesty with yourself as an educator and listening to the people that you're talking with. What is their feedback? How can you reintegrate them into the process? Like, the more people are touching and the more people are getting feedback or giving feedback, the more you understand how to move forward and design your classes.
I love that because that breaks down barriers that way.
Yep.
It's fantastic.
Okay, we're down to our final couple minutes. I just wanted to share everything at this conference in some way touches the fact that Part 115 passed and materials management planning will be called for by Eagle, and counties will be required either individually or with their neighboring counties to work towards developing materials management plans. And NextCycle is an Eagle initiative. The planning process is an Eagle initiative. And I just want folks to know that it's not an either or. Like, if you're a county and you're like, should I apply as a team for an accelerator track because we've got this great idea, or should I wait till after planning, or what should I do first? It does not matter. It's all accumulative. It's all helping accelerate your goals and your projects. If you're private sector, if you're a university, there's a place for you here where you're going to be better positioned within your county when they do planning. You're going to be like, we have a solution. We've done the feasibility analysis. Here's my pitch deck to compel you to include us in your solid waste plan or your materials management plan. So this is all about moving us towards that circular economy in all the ways that we can. NextCycle has a lot of data available online. As we complete this next phase of the gap analysis, there will be even more updated information available. So I really want to encourage you to connect with NextCycle. You can become a partner, get your logo up there. We'll understand what you're looking for in your projects, help with that networking and connection. There's a place for everyone. And I look forward to talking to you all further. Kira is also available. Let's give a big hand to our fabulous cast. And lunch is available. So
But one thing before you leave for lunch, there's a survey, if you're using the app and you click on the profile of this session, there's a button survey, and it's really appreciated if you take the survey and get feedback for all the sessions.